Ant-Man and the Wasp, the sequel to the middling Ant-Man, has finally come out, and now we get to find out what Ant-Man was up to during that whole Infinity War thing, if you remember that. It was a couple of months ago now. It was kind of a big deal. As it turns out, there actually are some consequences to the Sokovia Accords, and Scott Lang has found himself stuck in his house for 2 years, under house arrest, following all that stuff that went on in Germany at the end of Captain America Civil War. Do you remember that? It was kind of a big deal at the time. Yeah. Scott's in the doghouse with Hank and Hope Pym after also making them criminals under the Sokovia Accords. But the movie picks up with them getting back together to solve an important question left unanswered at the end of the previous movie. Is Hope's mum, the original Wasp, still alive in the quantum realm? Scott, Hope's and Hank's plans to retrieve Mama Wasp hit a couple of bumps in the road in the shape of Ghost, a mysterious figure who can phase in and out of quantum states to pass through physical objects. What fills the following 2 hours is essentially set piece after set piece based around a combination of 2 different elements. A group that is trying to get hold of a MacGuffin. These groups are Scott's group, Ghost's group, and a kind of shadowy arms dealer / information broker who's got brought in by the Pyms to get hold of black market sciencey stuff. And a MacGuffin, which is either a device that was built by the Pyms or the lab that it was built in, which has been shrunk to miniature size. So I hope you like those characters and the dynamics between them, because you're going to see a lot of them over the course of the film. There's not much variety in terms of what is going on in the movie. It's just literally chase people to get hold of a briefcase-sized object. It's a shame that the structure of the film is so formulaic and episodic, because really this should have a stronger emotional and more consequential storyline to it than the original Ant-Man, which is rare for a sequel. The original Ant-Man, to be honest, was kind of bland enough that I'm actually having trouble retrieving my memory of it, but I seem to remember it revolving around an evil businessman who's evil for evil reasons and business reasons, called Darren Cross, I think, who has like a sort of Bumblebee type outfit, and he can change size too, by the end of the movie anyway. Spoilers, sorry, for Ant-Man. I'm hoping you've seen it already if you're looking at a sequel review. Yeah, that's actually pretty much all I've got. My overriding impression of the first Ant-Man film was, wow, I wish Edgar Wright had ended up directing this. But this movie, because it revolves around getting back a loved one who is believed to be dead and may still be alive, should have more emotional weight to it. And unfortunately, it just doesn't really. Mostly because of that formulaic structure, although also because a lot of the dialogue and some of the scenes as a whole seem to have this weird stilted pacing to them. The scene where Lawrence Fishburne or Walton Goggins characters are introduced are a good example of this. They feel like they're stock scenes that introduce characters in basic ways that we understand. Take Goggins' scene, for example. He plays the same kind of character that he plays in pretty much everything. He's a shadowy, mercenary type guy who's really just in it for the business and doesn't care if anyone lives or dies. You know, standard Walton Goggins stuff. And I gotta say, by the way, what a name. This guy really has a name that matches up to his face and to his acting style, but I digress. Evangeline Lilly, Hope, the Wasp, walks into the restaurant that Goggins' character owns, and he does this spiel about how nice the food is and how she doesn't have some of it. She's having none of it, she just wants to get the piece of equipment and get out of there. Then Goggins reveals that he knows who she really is. He knows her code name isn't her real name. He knows she's Pym's daughter. Then she's like, oh god, I better take a seat and think about this. You know, the tables have changed, and now, you know, really clever bit of directing here. They're on the same level as each other, and you're thinking, oof, she's lost the power that she had in this conversation originally. He reveals that he wants her to do something evil, and then she says no. She gets up, she tries to take the power back, she's about to walk out, she just wants to leave her money, take the equipment and go. She doesn't want to accept his offer. And then he says, no, 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 no. Not only am I not going to give you the equipment, you're not going to have the money either. You got to get out of here. And you're thinking, God, how's she going to get out of this one? This seems like a really strong interaction where he's got all the power now. And then she comes back in a superhero costume and beats up some people. It's a stock scene and it feels like something you've seen before. It's a really typical thing to see in a movie like this, and it's just kind of boring. It's a bit cliche. And the more emotional scenes also suffer from this. There's a bit when Scott and Hope are having a chat and she's worried that her mum's going to come back and not be the same woman she was, which is, you know, a fair assumption because she's been in the quantum realm for like 30 years. I mean, I go on holiday for 2 weeks and I feel like a new man, so I don't know how she feels. But the movie doesn't really seem to be interested in those moments, and it doesn't really make them land. Oh well, at least we have the comedy elements of the film to hold on to. And that's supposed to be one of the differentiators for this movie versus other films in the MCU, right? I've been thinking about this recently. Why did I like the Phase 1 movies of Marvel versus the Phase 2 and Phase 3 movies, and now why am I starting to like Marvel movies again? What's the thing that they've changed? What have they taken notice of? Well, we still have some of the same problems. Far too much humour and inappropriate moments that undercuts otherwise quite tense scenes, which you'll be happy to know for fans of Marvel is back in force here. If you think about how the Captain America movies, the first and second one, have their own distinct feeling. The first one's a period film, the second one feels like a political thriller. If you think about the Thor movies and how they've gone from these really explicit fantasy settings to this sci-fi setting. Think about Guardians of the Galaxy and its kind of parodic space opera vibe. I do respect how they managed to differentiate those settings, and I think it started to crumble when they had to kind of conglomerate everything for Infinity War and for Civil War. I think that kind of caused them some problems that they're beginning to get out of, with more standalone movies like Homecoming and Black Panther that again feel like they have their own distinct tone. Now, Ant-Man is supposed to be more of a comedy film than an action film, although it is technically both. Even its action set pieces feel less realistic, say, than the Captain America movies, and they're more like slapsticky, CGI-focused big fight sequences. So although Ant-Man can't make it to emotional beats land, at least it has its comedy, right? One of the few things I remember really distinctly liking about the first movie was Michael Pena's great performance. He has these really funny sections where he delivers these really quick speeches that end up being these huge, long stories to explain a tiny detail, and that comes back and forth here. It's a really good comedic moment in the film. But in the more standard comedy exchanges, a lot of the jokes fall flat, and particularly early in the film, some of the comedy feels stilted and weirdly paced and maybe too broad. The first section of the movie where Paul Rudd's just hanging out with his kid felt more like Daddy Daycare or like a lower age range family film than it felt like a Paul Rudd comedy. And even where there's supposed to be comedic set pieces, because of course comedies can have set pieces too, there's a bit where Paul Rudd is tied up to a chair and then his phone goes off and it's his daughter. He's got a funny ringtone and it interrupts the villain's explanatory plan moment. And then he has to FaceTime with his kid and it turns out it wasn't that important. And like, no one in my cinema laughed. Although that was supposed to be a really big comedic moment. Maybe it's because it undercut an important plot point / emotional beat. Just saying. Paul Rudd, to his credit, does come to the film's rescue a number of times. He's charismatic and funny, and he's got a good sense of physical, but also he can do the quick-witted dialogue comedy as well. I like him, and I think it's because of him that this movie ends up being much less boring than it by all rights should be. And to be fair, the power use in this film is really cool. There's a MacGuffin building that is shrunk and carried around by characters during the film. There's a bit where Scott's suit malfunctions and he ends up being like small, but not that small, like the size of a young child. That stuff's really funny and well executed, but I couldn't help but feel like I wanted more of the movie to have that kind of feel to it. And instead I was ultimately disappointed by the film. Oh well, just stick around for that end credits scene that'll probably justify the ticket price for a large number of the expected audience for this film. If you've seen Ant-Man and the Wasp and you felt more enthusiastic than me, I'd love to find out why. I'm not dicking on that opinion, well, not overly, but I'm just interested in seeing what you saw in the movie that I didn't. And if you didn't like it, hey, come join the party in the comments. I'd love to find out what you thought about it. Don't forget to click like and subscribe, and then press the little bell button next to subscribe so that you get my videos when they come out. If you feel like you want to. If you don't, that's okay too. I won't mind. Mostly. That's it from me. Have a good one. Bye for now.